After Hawaii, he'll never see it coming.
What?
Ethan West was 42, a senior financial fraud investigator who looked more like the neighbor who fixed his own gutters than the man who had quietly helped dismantle billion-dollar scams. Everyone believed he lived an ordinary life, driving the same aging Honda and counting every dollar. What they didn't know was he'd secretly planned the Hawaiian anniversary Kaylee had dreamed about for years. Then he came home early and heard her whisper, "After Hawaii, he'll never see it coming." The wrapped plane tickets slipped from his hand as his fingers suddenly went numb. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, let me know your country and your local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where these stories reach. And if you love slow-burning mysteries, emotional twists, and stories where patience defeats deception, subscribe now so you won't miss tomorrow's story. The gift box remained exactly where Ethan West had left it. It sat inside the top drawer of his home office desk beneath a stack of tax folders and an owner's manual for the Honda Accord he had driven for 8 years. Inside the dark blue wrapping paper rested 2 first-class tickets from Chicago O'Hare to Kahului Airport reservations at the Four Seasons Resort Maui at Wailea, and a handwritten anniversary letter he had rewritten 6 different times. He closed the drawer without looking at it again. Most husbands would have walked upstairs the moment they heard those words. Most would have demanded answers. Most would have wanted a confession before sunrise. Ethan had spent nearly 2 decades investigating financial crimes worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Experience had taught him that the first story was rarely the true story. People lied. Documents lied. Even security cameras could lie when someone knew how to manipulate them. Evidence rarely did. The next morning began exactly as every weekday had for years. At 6:15 a.m., Ethan parked outside Harper's Corner Cafe on North Lincoln Avenue. Mrs. Delgado, the owner, had already poured his black coffee before he stepped through the door. "The usual?" she asked with a smile. He nodded. "Morning, Ethan." "Morning?" Nothing in his voice betrayed the fact that he had barely slept. His mind replayed only one sentence. After Hawaii, he'll never see it coming. He stirred his coffee, slowly watching the cream spread through the dark liquid before disappearing completely. Appearances could be deceiving. That lesson applied to coffee. It applied to people, especially to investigations. When he returned home 20 minutes later, Kaylee was standing in the kitchen wearing gray workout clothes, humming softly while packing strawberries into a plastic container. She looked up and smiled. "Morning." "Morning." She walked over and kissed him on the cheek. Her smile looked effortless, natural. The same smile she had worn for 12 years. He searched her face for hesitation, for guilt, for fear. He found none. "I made you eggs. They smell great. You've been working too hard. I know. You should take a vacation." The words landed harder than she could possibly know. He forced a small smile. "Maybe." She laughed quietly. "You always say maybe." He watched her return to the stove. If she was hiding something, she had extraordinary control. Or she wasn't hiding what he thought. His phone vibrated. "Ryan Carter." Ethan stepped onto the back porch before answering. "Everything ready?" Ryan asked. "Almost." "I got you upgraded." "You didn't have to." "I know, but 12 years only happens once." Ethan smiled despite himself. Ryan had owned Carter Elite Travel for nearly 15 years. They had met during freshman orientation at Northwestern University and remained friends ever since. "You now have an oceanfront suite." "You spent too much." "I used reward partnerships." Ethan laughed quietly. "You're impossible." "It gets better." "Oh, I secured the private sunset dinner on the beach." "I thought they were booked." "They were." "So," Ryan chuckled. "I know people." Ethan looked through the kitchen window. Kaylee was wiping down the counter. completely unaware. I can't wait to see her face. You've been planning this forever. 6 months. Worth every minute. Ryan lowered his voice. You're still keeping it secret. Until the morning we leave. I've never seen someone work this hard to surprise his wife. Ethan looked at the house. Neither had he. I'll call you later. He ended the call before Kaylee stepped outside. You okay? She asked. Just work. She nodded. You've had a lot of work lately. So have you. She hesitated. A little? That pause was barely noticeable. Most people would have ignored it. Ethan didn't. He simply stored it away beside every other observation. Later that afternoon, while reviewing forensic accounting reports downtown, another notification appeared on his phone. Midwest Community Bank. Credit inquiry completed. His eyebrows narrowed. He had not applied for credit. He opened the notification. Someone had requested verification connected to a joint financial profile. The inquiry amount was small, insignificant, but unusual. He checked the timestamp, 10:42 a.m. Kaylee had texted him at exactly 10:39. Hope your meeting is going well. Love you. He stared at both timestamps. Coincidence, maybe. He refused to guess. Instead, he opened a secure note on his encrypted phone. July 18th, 10:42 a.m. Unexpected credit inquiry. No conclusions, only facts. That was how investigations survived courtrooms. Facts, not theories. By evening, the house felt strangely normal. Kaylee prepared pasta. They watched half an episode of a crime documentary. She laughed at one scene. He laughed with her. Anyone watching through the window would have seen an ordinary American couple. Only Ethan knew how carefully he was observing everything. At 9:17 p.m., Kaylee's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. I'll be right back. She stepped into the laundry room. The door closed softly. Ethan remained on the couch. The television continued playing. A detective on screen explained chain of custody. Ethan muted it. The laundry room sat at the end of a narrow hallway. The walls in their home carried sound surprisingly well. He heard only fragments. Yes. He still doesn't know. A pause. After the vacation, another pause. Everything has to happen after the vacation. Silence. His jaw tightened. Still. He didn't move. Not one step. Not toward the hallway. Not toward the door. 30 seconds later, she returned, carrying a basket of folded towels. I forgot these. She smiled casually. He nodded. No accusations, no questions. No emotional explosion, only another observation added to the growing list inside his mind. That night after Kaylee had fallen asleep, Ethan walked downstairs. He opened his laptop. Not his government-issued computer, his personal encrypted machine. He created a folder, July timeline. Inside it, he saved phone conversations, bank notifications, credit inquiry, behavioral observations, dates, times, nothing else, no opinions, no assumptions. He understood something many investigators never learned. The moment emotion entered documentation, evidence lost value. At 11:48 p.m., another notification appeared in his email. A digital document had been delivered through a secure signature service. He frowned. He hadn't requested anything. The sender's name meant nothing. The attachment contained legal paperwork. Near the bottom appeared one familiar signature. Kaylee West. He zoomed in slowly. His pulse remained steady. His breathing didn't change. But something deep inside him quietly shifted. Because the document suggested his wife had agreed to something neither of them had ever discussed. And Ethan knew enough about legal paperwork to recognize one terrifying possibility. Either Kaylee had signed those papers in secret, or someone wanted him to believe she had. Ethan West had examined forged signatures before, hundreds of them. Some had been so crude that a cashier could have spotted the differences in seconds. Others had fooled banks, auditors, and attorneys for years before finally collapsing under forensic analysis. The signature at the bottom of the legal document belonged somewhere in the middle. Good enough to convince almost anyone, not good enough to convince him. He enlarged the final page until Kaylee's name occupied most of his laptop screen. Kaylee West. The letters looked right at first glance. The looping K, the narrow Y, the gentle curve beneath the final T. But Ethan wasn't studying the letters. He was studying the rhythm. Every person's signature carried unconscious habits. Some people hesitated before crossing a T. Others applied heavier pressure at the beginning than at the end. Most never realized they repeated the same tiny movements every single time they signed their name. Kaylee had one habit she had never broken. She always lifted her pen for a fraction of a second before writing the W in West. The scanned signature never paused. One continuous stroke. Perfect. Too perfect. He leaned back. The document wasn't proof of betrayal. It was proof that someone understood how to imitate her handwriting. Not well enough. His phone showed 12:31 a.m. He saved screenshots, recorded metadata from the digital file, and copied the transmission information into his encrypted notebook. Again, no conclusions, only facts. He shut the computer and went upstairs. Kaylee was asleep on her side of the bed, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. The bedside lamp cast a soft, amber glow across the room. She looked peaceful. Nothing about her face suggested someone secretly plotting against her husband. Still, appearances had fooled better investigators than him. He quietly slipped beneath the blanket without waking her. Sleep didn't come easily. At 7 the next morning, Ethan entered the Federal Financial Crimes Office in downtown Chicago. The 22nd floor overlooked the Chicago River, where tour boats drifted beneath steel bridges carrying commuters into another ordinary Thursday. Ordinary never lasted. His office reflected his personality: no family photographs, no sports memorabilia, no expensive decorations. Only organized shelves filled with financial statutes, fraud case binders, and framed commendations that most visitors barely noticed. He unlocked his computer. Instead of opening the mystery document again, he searched for one name: Sullivan Infrastructure Group. The company immediately appeared. Headquarters Chicago. Annual revenue approximately $2.8 billion. Public projects across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. CEO Graham Sullivan. Ethan recognized the name. Not because he'd investigated him, because Graham Sullivan had appeared repeatedly in business magazines over the last decade. A self-made executive, charitable donations, university scholarships, veterans housing projects, a polished public image, exactly the kind that often discouraged deeper questions. He opened the company's corporate filings. Nothing unusual: board members, quarterly reports, construction contracts. Everything appeared clean, too clean. He searched several subcontractors listed in recent infrastructure projects. One company immediately caught his attention: Lake Horizon Logistics. Small, recently incorporated. Minimal employees, large government payments. He opened another record, then another, then another. By lunchtime, he had identified 4 companies sharing remarkably similar registration histories. Different names, different mailing addresses, the same formation attorney, the same registered agent, the same accounting firm. He stared at the screen. Shell companies. Maybe. Enough similarities existed to justify further examination. His office phone rang. Ethan? Morning? Agent Sarah Mitchell's voice remained as calm as ever. You still joining tomorrow's fraud task force briefing? I'll be there. You sound tired. Long night. You working another site analysis? You know me. She laughed quietly. I do. Sarah Mitchell had partnered with Ethan twice before on federal fraud investigations. She respected one quality above all others. He never rushed, never guessed, never leaked theories. He simply gathered facts until the evidence spoke for itself. I'll see you tomorrow. You will. The call ended. He returned to the financial records. Several payments moved from Sullivan Infrastructure into consulting firms. Those consulting firms paid transportation companies. Those transportation companies transferred funds overseas. Not illegal, not yet. But layered transactions always deserved attention. His screen flashed with an incoming calendar reminder. Lunch with Kaylee? He had forgotten. They met every other Thursday at a small Italian cafe 2 blocks from her design studio. He almost canceled. Instead, he closed every document. The investigation could wait 1 hour. Kaylee waved from a corner booth when he entered. "You actually remembered." "I almost didn't." She smiled. "I'll take almost." They ordered soup and sandwiches. Normal conversation filled the next 20 minutes. Her latest interior design project. A difficult client. A leaking office ceiling. Nothing unusual. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced downward. For the first time that afternoon, Ethan noticed genuine tension. Not guilt, fear, tiny, barely visible. Her fingers tightened around the phone before she locked the screen. "You okay?" he asked. She forced a smile. "Just work." "What happened?" "Nothing." She changed the subject immediately. Too quickly. He noticed. He simply didn't press. On the drive back to his office, one question repeated itself. Why would someone forging Kaylee's signature coincide with unexplained corporate financial activity? 2 unrelated events possible. Connected also possible. By late afternoon, Ethan had quietly submitted several public record requests through routine investigative channels that required no special authorization. No one questioned them. He had requested corporate registration amendments involving Sullivan Infrastructure and its subcontractors. Routine paperwork. Routine curiosity. Nothing more. At 5:42 p.m., an unfamiliar envelope rested beneath his apartment mailbox. No postage, no return address. Someone had delivered it by hand. Inside lay a single folded sheet. Typed. No fingerprints visible, no handwritten marks. Only one sentence. "Stop asking questions." He read it twice, then slipped the paper into a protective evidence sleeve he kept inside his briefcase. No anger, no fear, just another piece. Someone knew he was looking. The question wasn't why, the question was how. He hadn't told anyone. Not Ryan, not Sarah, not even Kaylee. His searches had remained within publicly available databases. His requests looked routine, yet someone already wanted him discouraged. That realization changed everything, because guilty people often panicked. Professionals didn't. Professionals redirected attention. Professionals manufactured distractions. Professionals created false trails. He drove home through evening traffic beneath a gray Chicago sky. Kaylee was watering flowers on the front porch. She smiled when she saw him. "You're home early." "So are you." "My afternoon appointment canceled." He carried the groceries inside. Everything looked exactly as it had yesterday. Everything except Ethan. For the first time since hearing the phone call, he began to suspect something far more dangerous than marital betrayal. Someone had carefully placed evidence where he would eventually find it. The mysterious legal document. The suspicious signature. The timing. Even the anonymous warning. Each discovery had pointed in one direction. Toward Kaylee. Too directly. Almost as though someone wanted Ethan to stop investigating the financial records and instead focus entirely on his marriage. That thought lingered with him long after midnight. Because experienced investigators understood one uncomfortable truth. When every clue points toward the obvious suspect, someone usually arranged the clues that way. The anonymous warning changed Ethan West's priorities. Until that moment, his questions had centered on Kaylee. After reading the typed note, his attention shifted somewhere else entirely. People trying to hide an affair rarely hand-delivered anonymous threats. Corporate criminals did. He placed the folded paper inside an evidence envelope labeled the time and location where he had found it, then locked it inside the small fireproof safe, hidden behind law books in his home office. Chain of custody began the moment evidence entered his possession. Old habits never disappeared. Friday morning arrived under low gray clouds hanging over downtown Chicago. At precisely 7:45 a.m., Ethan parked 2 blocks away from Sullivan Infrastructure Group's headquarters. The 28-story glass tower overlooked the Chicago River, reflecting the skyline like polished steel. Employees streamed through revolving doors carrying coffee cups and laptop bags. Construction executives, project managers, accountants, lawyers, ordinary people beginning another workday. Ethan remained inside his Honda. He wasn't conducting surveillance, not officially. He simply wanted to observe the rhythm of the building before deciding his next move. At exactly 8:11, a black Cadillac Escalade stopped beneath the covered entrance. The driver stepped out first. A tall man wearing a charcoal suit emerged from the rear passenger seat. Even from half a block away, Ethan recognized Graham Sullivan from magazine photographs. Mid-40s, athletic build, perfect posture. Silver threaded through dark hair at the temples. He smiled naturally while shaking hands with employees entering the building. People smiled back. Several even stopped to thank him. One older maintenance worker clapped Graham on the shoulder before disappearing inside. A man capable of inspiring that kind of loyalty rarely looked like a criminal. Neither had several executives Ethan had helped prosecute over the years. He watched Graham disappear into the lobby. No unusual security, no bodyguards. Confidence often looked exactly like normalcy. Ethan started the engine and drove toward his office. Before noon, 3 responses to his public record requests had arrived. He spread printed documents across his desk. Lake Horizon Logistics, Midwest Utility Consulting, Prairie Transit Solutions, Blue Shore Equipment Leasing. 4 companies, different industries, different offices. Yet each shared one curious detail. Every corporation had been legally organized by the same downtown law firm, Bennett & Cross Corporate Legal. The senior partner listed on every filing was Olivia Bennett. Ethan underlined the name once, not because he believed she had committed a crime, because patterns deserved attention. His office phone rang. It was Ryan Carter. "You busy?" "Always," Ryan laughed. "I've got good news." "I'm listening." "I managed to upgrade your helicopter tour." "I already thanked you." "You haven't heard this part?" "What part?" "They're giving you a private sunset landing on the ridge overlooking Haleakala." Ethan leaned back. "You pulled that off." "Connections." "I owe you." "You owe me pictures." Ethan smiled. "I can do that." Ryan hesitated. "Everything okay?" "What makes you ask?" "You sound different." "Just tired." "You still planning to surprise Kaylee the morning you leave?" Yes, although for the first time he wasn't certain how that morning would unfold. "I'll send the updated itinerary tonight." "Thanks." The call ended. Updated itinerary. The phrase lingered in Ethan's thoughts. If someone truly intended to use Hawaii for something larger, anyone gaining access to Ryan's travel agency could potentially learn exactly when Ethan and Kaylee would leave Chicago. He opened the reservation portal Ryan had emailed weeks earlier. Nothing unusual. No unauthorized logins, no suspicious changes. Still, another observation, another note. Never assumptions. Always documentation. Late that afternoon, Ethan left work 15 minutes early. Not to follow Kaylee. Simply because she had mentioned attending a design consultation downtown. Her appointment happened to be only 3 blocks from Bennett & Cross Corporate Legal. Coincidence deserved verification. He parked across the street from the office building at 4:08 p.m. People entered, people exited, lawyers carrying briefcases, clients, delivery drivers. At 4:27, Kaylee appeared. She wore a navy blazer over a cream blouse and carried a leather portfolio Ethan had given her 3 Christmases earlier. She checked her phone before entering the building. His heartbeat slowed. Not faster. Slower. Training always took over when uncertainty increased. He waited. 8 minutes passed. Then another 5. At 4:41, another black SUV stopped outside. Olivia Bennett stepped onto the sidewalk. She matched every corporate attorney Ethan had imagined. Confident, precise, calm. She entered the building without looking around. 23 minutes later, both women emerged together. They walked toward a nearby cafe. Neither appeared angry. Neither laughed. The conversation looked serious, professional. Kaylee handed Olivia a manila envelope. Olivia accepted it without opening it. Then she handed Kaylee a single folder. No embrace. No obvious familiarity. Just business. Ethan watched through binoculars small enough to fit inside his glove compartment. Something felt wrong. Not because the meeting existed, because it looked too visible. The cafe sat on one of the busiest corners in the financial district. Anyone following Kaylee would have found them, including him. Professional criminals preferred privacy. This meeting almost seemed designed to be witnessed. The thought settled heavily in his mind. He did not leave his vehicle. He did not photograph them. He simply memorized details. Time, clothing, objects exchanged, direction of travel. Nothing more. When the women separated, Kaylee walked toward the parking garage. Olivia disappeared back into the office tower. Ethan waited another 10 minutes before driving away. He never wanted Kaylee to suspect she had been observed. Back home that evening, dinner unfolded as usual. Kaylee talked about paint samples for a hotel renovation. Ethan discussed budget hearings at work. Neither mentioned downtown. Neither mentioned Olivia Bennett. Silence became its own language. After dinner, Ethan excused himself and walked into his office. He opened a city map. The cafe, the law office, the parking garage. 3 blocks, 23 minutes. He reconstructed the timeline. Then another question appeared. If the meeting had been intentionally public, who was supposed to see it? At 9:30 p.m., he called a former colleague who now worked in commercial property management. I need a favor. What kind? Security cameras? What address? Ethan gave him the location of the cafe. I only need to know whether exterior cameras cover the sidewalk. His friend paused. They do. Can footage be requested? Usually. Usually. There was an electrical failure yesterday. What kind? Server outage. When? His friend checked something. Almost all recordings between 4 and 5 yesterday were corrupted. Ethan closed his eyes. Corrupted. Exactly the hour Kaylee met Olivia Bennett. What caused it? No idea. Thanks. He hung up. His office suddenly felt much quieter. Server failures happened, power outages happened, but timing mattered, especially when timing consistently benefited the same unknown people. He opened his notebook. Page after page contained observations. The phone call, the forged signature, the shell companies, the anonymous warning, the meeting, now missing surveillance footage. Individually, each event could be explained. Together they formed something else, not proof, a pattern. Ethan stared through the office window into the darkness covering his backyard. Whoever orchestrated this operation possessed resources, legal expertise, financial knowledge, technical capability, and perhaps most importantly, they understood exactly how an investigator's mind worked. They weren't simply hiding evidence. They were feeding him selected pieces while quietly removing everything that might reveal the complete picture. For the first time since overhearing Kaylee's phone call, Ethan became certain of one thing. Someone wanted him chasing the wrong target. And that meant the real crime had not even revealed itself yet. Ethan West had learned years ago that deleting data rarely erased it. People believed dragging a file into a recycle bin made it disappear. Sophisticated criminals believed wiping a hard drive solved the problem. The truth usually lived somewhere in between. Digital systems left shadows. Every transaction, every login, every modification created another fingerprint. The challenge was never whether evidence existed. It was whether someone knew where to look. Saturday morning arrived unusually quiet. Kaylee had left early for what she described as a client consultation in Evanston. She kissed Ethan goodbye, apologized for missing breakfast, and promised to be home before dinner. He smiled. "Drive safely." "I will." The front door closed. Her car backed down the driveway. Only after she disappeared around the corner did Ethan unlock the encrypted workstation hidden inside his office cabinet. He connected an isolated forensic laptop to an external storage device and opened the financial records he had quietly collected throughout the week. The shell companies appeared unrelated on paper, different industries, different executives, different mailing addresses. But Ethan wasn't interested in names. He was interested in movement. Money always behaved like water. No matter how carefully someone redirected it, it eventually followed patterns. He built a transaction map across 6 months. Thin blue lines connected one account to another. Small payments became larger transfers. Consulting fees became equipment leases. Equipment leases became transportation reimbursements. Eventually, nearly every trail curved back toward Sullivan Infrastructure Group. Not directly, never directly. The money moved through enough layers to discourage ordinary auditors. But Ethan noticed something else. Every transfer occurred within 48 hours of a government construction payment. That timing wasn't illegal, it was remarkably disciplined. He leaned closer. The final destinations weren't domestic banks. They were international clearing institutions. Cayman Islands, Singapore, Luxembourg, 3 financial hubs, 1 repeating sequence. Someone wasn't simply moving money. Someone was cleaning it. His secure phone vibrated. Ryan Carter. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." "I wanted to confirm your airport transportation." "I already arranged parking." Ryan laughed. "I know you did." "So, I upgraded you again." "You really need to stop doing that." "No chance." "What now?" "A private car will pick you up at your house." Ethan frowned. "I never gave you my home address." Ryan hesitated. "Actually, what? It was already attached to your reservation profile." Ethan's expression hardened. "It shouldn't have been." Ryan checked his computer. "You're right. There are notes here I didn't add." "What kind of notes?" "Flight reminders." "So delete them." "I already did." Ryan paused. "Someone accessed the reservation 2 nights ago." Ethan stood. "From where?" "I'm looking." Keyboard clicks echoed through the phone. "That's strange." "What?" "The login came from downtown Chicago." "Can you send me the access log?" "Sure." "And Ryan." "Yeah." "Don't discuss this with anyone." The line fell silent. "You think something's wrong?" "I don't know yet." "But you're checking." I always check." 5 minutes later, the log arrived. Unauthorized login. 2:14 a.m. IP address masked through a commercial VPN. The reservation itself hadn't changed. Whoever entered the system wasn't interested in canceling the vacation. They only wanted information. Departure time, airline, hotel, room category. Every detail Ethan had spent 6 months arranging. His investigation had just become personal. He added another page to his timeline. Unauthorized travel system access. Unknown actor, no modifications. Information copied. He circled one sentence. Information copied. Not stolen, copied. The distinction mattered. Sunday afternoon, Ethan drove toward downtown again. Not to follow Graham Sullivan. Instead, he visited Jonathan Pierce. Pierce's office occupied the top floor of an old limestone building overlooking Daly Plaza. The attorney had spent nearly 30 years handling federal litigation involving financial crimes. More importantly, he understood discretion. Jonathan greeted Ethan without surprise. "You only visit when something complicated happens." Ethan smiled faintly. "You know me too well. I've tried cases against you." "Fair point." They settled into leather chairs overlooking the city. Jonathan listened without interruption as Ethan explained everything except the overheard phone call. He described the forged signature, the shell corporations, the anonymous warning, the suspicious meeting, the travel reservation access. When Ethan finished, Jonathan folded his hands. "You haven't accused your wife?" "No." "You haven't confronted anyone?" "No." "Good." Jonathan stood and walked toward a bookshelf. "You know why?" "Because I don't have enough." "You don't have enough evidence." He returned carrying a legal notebook. "If someone is framing either you or your wife, premature confrontation gives them exactly what they want." Ethan nodded. "They'll adapt." "Exactly." Jonathan continued. "Legally speaking, document everything." "I already am." "Store duplicate copies." "I have." "Separate locations." "I'll do that today." Jonathan looked directly at him. "And trust absolutely no electronic account you haven't personally verified." That sentence lingered longer than anything else. Back home, Ethan spent the evening changing passwords, bank accounts, insurance, retirement funds, government authentication, travel reservations. Every credential became new. Every recovery email changed. Every security question replaced. Near midnight, he logged into one final government authentication portal. Access denied. He blinked. He entered the password again. Access denied. His account had been temporarily locked after multiple unsuccessful attempts. His pulse remained steady. Someone had tried accessing his federal credentials recently. He immediately called the 24-hour security hotline. "This is Investigator Ethan West." After verifying his identity, the cybersecurity officer reviewed the account. There were 5 failed login attempts. "When?" "Approximately 43 minutes ago." "Location?" "We're still tracing." "Were they successful?" "No." "What were they attempting to access?" The officer paused. "Restricted financial investigation databases." Exactly the databases Ethan had permission to use. Someone wanted access under his name. Or someone wanted the failed attempts documented under his identity. Either possibility carried serious consequences. After ending the call, Ethan sat alone in the dark office. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, every piece of the puzzle shifted. The forged signature, the anonymous threat, the copied vacation itinerary, the attempted access to his government credentials. None of those actions generated money. They generated something more valuable: confusion. If investigators later discovered fraudulent activity connected to Ethan's account, someone could argue he had abused his own access. If Kaylee appeared connected through forged legal documents, suspicion would naturally spread to both of them. Someone wasn't merely committing financial fraud. Someone was quietly constructing 2 perfect scapegoats. Ethan closed his notebook. For the first time since this began, he stopped asking who was being framed. The answer was becoming painfully clear. Both of them. And whoever stood behind the operation had already planned several moves ahead. Monday morning began with a federal briefing that had nothing to do with Ethan West's private investigation. Or so it appeared. Conference Room B overlooked the east side of downtown Chicago. 12 investigators from different agencies filled the long oak table. Coffee cups, legal pads, and laptops formed the familiar landscape of another interagency meeting. FBI Special Agent Sarah Mitchell arrived exactly on time. She carried no stack of files, only a slim tablet and a stainless steel coffee mug. Sarah believed information should be organized before it became visible. It was one of the reasons Ethan respected her. She noticed him as soon as she entered. "You slept." Enough? I'll believe that when your coffee cup isn't empty before mine. A faint smile crossed Ethan's face. That was as close to humor as either of them usually came. The meeting focused on procurement fraud affecting several Midwestern infrastructure projects, federal grants, state contracts, construction delays, cost overruns. Nothing unusual. Nothing connected directly to Sullivan Infrastructure Group. At least, not publicly. As investigators filed out an hour later, Sarah slowed her pace. Ethan. He stopped. You have a minute? He nodded. She led him into a smaller interview room down the hallway. The door closed behind them. She didn't sit. Neither did he. You've been distracted. I'm working through something. I figured. She folded her arms. You've submitted 3 public record requests this week. I have. All connected to commercial construction. Correct. That's outside your current assignment. It is. Sarah watched him for several seconds. She knew him well enough not to ask whether he was chasing a conspiracy. Instead, she asked something more important. Do you trust your instincts? I trust evidence. That's not what I asked. Ethan looked toward the window. My instincts are telling me someone wants my attention. Sarah nodded once. Good. She reached into her folder and placed a sealed envelope on the table. We received this Friday. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was an internal intelligence summary. The title immediately caught his attention. Possible Coordinated Procurement Fraud Network. Several company names appeared on the first page. Lake Horizon Logistics, Prairie Transit Solutions, Midwest Utility Consulting, Blue Shore Equipment Leasing, the same 4 shell companies. He looked up. When did this start? 3 months ago. Why wasn't my division notified? We didn't have enough. He understood. Federal agencies followed the same rule he lived by. Suspicion never justified escalation. Evidence did. Sarah continued. Someone has been moving money through infrastructure subcontractors. How much? We estimate somewhere between $180 and $220 million. Ethan remained expressionless. Inside, every piece of his private investigation clicked into place. The shell companies weren't isolated. They already existed on the FBI's radar. He carefully chose his next words. Any suspects? Sarah shook her head. None we can prove. Any pattern? Transfers accelerate every quarter. She hesitated. One more thing. She opened another file. We believe the final movement of funds hasn't happened yet. When? Within 2 weeks. Exactly the same window as the Hawaii trip. Ethan didn't react outwardly. Only Sarah noticed the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. You already knew something. I suspected. You want to tell me? He considered the question. Professional ethics demanded caution. Personal loyalty demanded even more. Finally, he spoke. I believe someone may be attempting to frame me. Sarah stared at him. She didn't laugh. She didn't question his judgment. She simply asked, What evidence? For the next 20 minutes, Ethan described everything. The forged legal document, the copied travel itinerary, the anonymous warning, the failed government login, the meeting between Kaylee and Olivia Bennett. He omitted only one detail. The phone call. Without context, it remained nothing more than a fragment. Sarah listened silently. When he finished, she spoke only after reviewing her notes. You realize what this means? I do. If you're right, you cannot investigate this alone. I wasn't planning to. She slid a business card across the table. From this moment forward, anything connected to Sullivan Infrastructure comes through me. You trust me? I trust your documentation. That answer meant more than trust. It meant Sarah intended to protect both the investigation and Ethan. She lowered her voice. Unofficially, he waited. I've heard Graham Sullivan's name before. Ethan looked up. From where? A closed corruption inquiry. What happened? It died. Why? No witnesses. No financial records. No digital evidence. Everything disappeared. Professional, clean, expensive. Exactly the kind of operation Ethan had begun to suspect. Sarah continued. If Sullivan really is involved this time, we do nothing until we can prove everything. Ethan nodded. No shortcuts. No assumptions. No emotional decisions. She smiled slightly. That's why I wanted you involved. Back at his office, Ethan found another surprise waiting in his inbox. His public record requests had generated additional corporate filings over the weekend. He printed them immediately. Most appeared ordinary. Board resolutions, vendor agreements, insurance certificates. Until one document caught his eye. A shipping authorization. Destination Honolulu. Container contents commercial surveying equipment. Declared value $4.8 million. Nothing remarkable, except the shipment originated from one of the shell companies, Lake Horizon Logistics. Construction equipment certainly traveled to Hawaii every day. Yet something about the paperwork bothered him. The shipment weighed only 280 pounds. Impossible. Real surveying equipment weighed several thousand pounds. Someone had declared cargo that physically could not exist. He circled the shipping weight. Another discrepancy. Another quiet lie hidden inside ordinary paperwork. Late that afternoon, Ethan received a text from Kaylee. Running late? Meeting a supplier? Don't wait for dinner? Love you? He stared at the screen. No panic, no accusations, only another timestamp. At 6:30, he drove home alone. Halfway there, his secure phone vibrated. Sarah. We've got movement. What happened? Our financial monitoring unit detected preparation for a major offshore transfer. When? Authorization window opens next Thursday. The exact day Ethan and Kaylee were scheduled to leave for Maui. He gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. The vacation? Sarah immediately understood. What about it? They know exactly when I'll be gone. Silence filled the line. Finally, Sarah spoke. I think you're right. They're scheduling the transfer while I'm out of the country. So the lead investigator most likely to notice anything is unavailable. Sarah finished the sentence. And potentially under suspicion. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The implications were obvious. Someone had not only studied federal investigative procedures. Someone had studied Ethan himself, his habits, his travel, his authority, his marriage, his access. Nothing about this operation was accidental anymore. That evening, Ethan walked into the garage intending to retrieve luggage from an overhead shelf. Instead, he stopped. His Honda sat exactly where he had parked it. Yet something felt different. He slowly approached the driver's side. The seat position had changed, only half an inch. Most people would never have noticed. Ethan always drove with the seat one click farther back. He opened the door carefully. Nothing appeared missing. The glove compartment remained closed. Insurance papers untouched. Registration still inside. Then he looked beneath the dashboard. A tiny adhesive mark. Fresh. Something had been attached and removed. His pulse remained calm. Someone had entered his vehicle. Not to steal it, not to vandalize it, to install something, or retrieve something. He backed away without touching another surface. Inside the house, he wrote one final note before locking the notebook. If someone had accessed his travel reservations, attempted to use his government credentials, tracked his movements, and entered his vehicle, then this investigation had already become much larger than financial fraud. Someone wasn't just watching Ethan West, they were preparing for him. Ethan West did not report the vehicle immediately, not because it wasn't serious, because he wanted to understand whether the intrusion had been meant to intimidate him or to collect something. Filing a report too early might alert whoever had entered the garage that they had been noticed. Instead, he documented everything. He photographed the adhesive residue beneath the dashboard. He measured the driver's seat position. He recorded the tire pressure, the mileage, even the angle of the rearview mirror. Every detail went into his encrypted log. Then he drove a different vehicle to work the next morning, a gray government sedan. If someone expected to continue tracking the Honda, they would find an empty driveway. By noon, Sarah Mitchell had quietly arranged for the FBI's technical response team to examine Ethan's car inside a secured garage. No uniforms, no flashing lights, no unnecessary attention. An hour later, Sarah called. "They found traces." "What kind?" "Industrial adhesive." "So, something was attached?" "Yes." "What was it?" "We don't know." "They removed it." "Looks that way." Ethan thanked her and ended the call. No answers. Only confirmation. Someone had indeed entered his vehicle. His thoughts returned to Kaylee. For days he had watched her become quieter. She still smiled. She still asked about his day. She still reminded him to take vitamins before leaving for work. But there was a difference now. She seemed to listen before answering simple questions, as if weighing every word. That evening she arrived home carrying 2 large fabric sample books from a hotel renovation project. "I thought we'd order takeout," she said. "Sounds good." She slipped off her shoes and rubbed the back of her neck. "Long day." "You look exhausted." She laughed softly. "I feel exhausted." He watched her for a moment. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Not from guilt, from lack of sleep. He had seen that look countless times on witnesses living under pressure. It unsettled him. After dinner, she excused herself. "I need to answer one email." She disappeared into the upstairs study. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her phone vibrated once, twice, 3 times. She didn't come downstairs. Ethan quietly washed the dishes, dried them, and placed each one in its usual cabinet. Routine gave his mind space to think. At exactly 8:42 p.m., he heard the front door open and close. Kaylee had stepped onto the porch. Another phone call. He turned off the kitchen faucet. The open window above the sink allowed only fragments of sound to drift inside. "Duh, I told you." A pause. I can't keep doing this." Another pause. "Please stop." Then silence. No mention of Hawaii. No mention of Ethan. Only a woman whose voice sounded tired. When she came back inside, her eyes were slightly red. She noticed him immediately. "You didn't hear me come in." "I was cleaning." She forced a smile. "I'm going upstairs." "You okay?" "Just work." Again, just work. The explanation sounded rehearsed, not because it was false, because she wanted it to end the conversation. Ethan didn't follow. Instead, he sat alone in the living room long after she had gone to bed. He replayed every interaction from the past 2 weeks, the late-night calls, the meeting with Olivia Bennett, the forged documents, the anonymous threats. One possibility had slowly grown stronger. What if Kaylee wasn't participating? What if she was complying? The distinction changed everything. Wednesday afternoon, Ethan left work 30 minutes early, not because he intended to spy on his wife, because Sarah had informed him that no significant financial activity was expected until the following week. For the first time, he allowed himself to observe without focusing solely on documents. Kaylee's design studio occupied the 2nd floor of a renovated brick warehouse in River North. At 4:15 p.m., she exited carrying her leather portfolio. She drove west instead of toward home. Ethan followed from the distance. Never too close, never through the same lane. Professional surveillance relied on patience, not proximity. Kaylee eventually parked outside a small church several miles away, St. Andrew's Community Center. The building wasn't hosting services. Instead, several nonprofit organizations rented meeting rooms there during the week. Kaylee entered through a side entrance. Ethan remained across the street. 7 minutes later, another vehicle arrived. A dark blue sedan. Olivia Bennett stepped out. She carried no briefcase, only a slim folder. The attorney entered the building without hesitation. Ethan checked his watch. 22 minutes passed. No one exited. 30 minutes, then 38. Finally, the side door opened. Kaylee and Olivia emerged together. But this meeting looked completely different from the one downtown. Kaylee wasn't speaking. She stared at the ground. Olivia said something quietly before handing her another envelope. Kaylee accepted it with trembling hands. Trembling. Ethan had never seen that before. Olivia walked away without looking back. Kaylee remained standing beside the church steps. She didn't move. She simply held the envelope against her chest. Then, unexpectedly, she climbed into her car, but didn't start the engine. 5 minutes passed. 10. Ethan watched through binoculars. Kaylee lowered her head onto the steering wheel. Her shoulders began to shake. She was crying. Not dramatically, not loudly. The silent kind of crying that came only after someone had spent too long pretending to be strong. Ethan's grip tightened around the steering wheel. Every instinct told him to walk across the street, to open the passenger door, to ask one simple question. What's wrong? Instead, he remained exactly where he was. Not because he didn't care, because he knew one interruption could destroy weeks of careful observation. He hated the decision. It felt less like discipline and more like betrayal. After nearly 15 minutes, Kaylee wiped her eyes, adjusted the rearview mirror, and took a slow breath. Before starting the engine, she removed her phone from her purse. She stared at the screen for several seconds. Then Ethan watched her thumb move rapidly. Delete, 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 delete. Again, again, again. Message after message disappeared. Not one or two, dozens. She wasn't answering anyone. She was erasing something. When she finally drove away, Ethan waited another minute before pulling into the nearly empty parking lot. He approached the place where her vehicle had been parked. There was nothing obvious on the pavement. No dropped papers, no discarded envelope. Only one small object caught his attention. A torn corner from a sticky note had become trapped beneath a tire mark. Most of the writing had been ripped away. Only 3 typed words remained. Or, he dies. Ethan froze. The fragment could have belonged to anything. An unrelated document, a discarded memo, a piece of junk blown across the parking lot. Or it could belong to the envelope Kaylee had carried. He carefully slipped the paper into an evidence sleeve. His breathing remained steady. Inside, however, something shifted. He had spent nearly 2 weeks believing Kaylee might be hiding a betrayal. Now watching her cry alone in a parked car, deleting what looked like threatening messages, he found that theory becoming harder to defend. Someone was pressuring her. The only question was why, and if the words on that torn fragment belonged to the message she had received. Then the threat had never been about ending a marriage. It had been about keeping Ethan alive. He drove home with the evidence secured beside him, realizing that every answer he uncovered seemed only to make Kaylee look less like a conspirator, and more like someone running out of ways to protect the man she loved. For the first time since overhearing the phone call, Ethan West stopped searching for signs of betrayal. He started searching for signs of fear. The difference altered everything. Fear left different footprints. People protecting secrets avoided eye contact. People protecting someone they loved often looked over their shoulder. People trapped by threats rarely lied well because they were trying to balance 2 impossible truths at once. Kaylee had begun doing exactly that. She apologized more often. She smiled less. She lingered beside Ethan for a few extra seconds before leaving each morning, almost as though she wanted to say something, but couldn't. 3 days remained before their scheduled flight to Maui. Ethan made a decision. No matter what happened behind the scenes, he would keep his promise. He would surprise Kaylee with the vacation. If someone had built a plan around those travel dates, changing them now would only force the unseen players to adapt. Sarah Mitchell had reached the same conclusion. "We keep everything looking normal," she had told him during a secure call. "If they're expecting you in Hawaii, you go to Hawaii." "And the investigation?" "We continue quietly. You'll have surveillance." Sarah hesitated only briefly. "You won't be alone." That was all she could legally say. Thursday evening arrived warm and unusually clear for late summer in Chicago. Kaylee returned home carrying grocery bags. She found Ethan setting the dining room table with unusual care. Candles. Real plates instead of the everyday ones. A bottle of sparkling cider chilled in an ice bucket. She looked around in surprise. "Did I forget something?" He smiled. "No." "Then what's all this?" "I wanted dinner to be different." Her expression softened. "You didn't have to." "I know." During the meal, they talked about ordinary things: a neighbor replacing his roof, a new restaurant opening downtown, Ryan's latest travel promotion that Ethan pretended to know nothing about. For nearly an hour, the tension that had settled over the house seemed to disappear. After dessert, Ethan stood. "I have one more thing." Kaylee frowned. "What?" He disappeared into his office. For several seconds, he simply stared at the gift box resting inside the desk drawer. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times. Originally, he pictured excitement, laughter, a kiss. Now uncertainty occupied the same space. Still, he carried the box into the living room. Kaylee looked genuinely confused. "Ethan." He handed it to her. "Happy early anniversary." She laughed nervously. "Our anniversary isn't until next week." "I know. I thought we weren't exchanging gifts until then." "We're not?" She blinked. "Then what is this?" "Open it." She carefully untied the ribbon. The wrapping paper fell away. Inside lay the navy blue folder containing airline tickets, hotel confirmations, activity reservations, and a handwritten letter. She stared silently. Her eyes moved from one page to another. Chicago to Maui, first class, oceanfront suite, private sunset dinner, helicopter tour over Haleakala. The color slowly drained from her face, then tears filled her eyes. "Ethan." She couldn't finish. He watched quietly as she covered her mouth with one hand. "You planned all this?" "For 6 months." Her shoulders began trembling. "Oh my God." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't immediately understand. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't happiness alone. It looked almost like heartbreak. She stood abruptly and wrapped both arms around him, holding him tighter than she had in weeks. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. The words caught him off guard. He gently rested a hand on her back. "You've always deserved this." She pulled away just enough to wipe her eyes. "When do we leave?" "Saturday morning." Her gaze returned to the tickets. For one brief second, Ethan saw fear again. It appeared and disappeared so quickly another person might have missed it. Not him. She forced another smile. "It's perfect. I hoped you'd like it. I love it." She wasn't lying. Of that he became increasingly certain. The problem was that love and fear now existed together on her face. Later that night, after Kaylee had gone upstairs, Ethan's secure phone vibrated once. Sarah. He stepped onto the back patio before answering. "We've confirmed movement." "What kind?" "The offshore accounts are active." "So the timeline hasn't changed?" "No." She lowered her voice. "Our cyber team also intercepted encrypted communications referencing Maui." Ethan looked toward the dark backyard. "They're already there." "Most likely." "You think they're watching the most likely?" You think they're watching the resort. We think they're watching you. He absorbed the sentence without speaking. Sarah continued. You maintain the vacation. And if something happens, you observe. Nothing more. Nothing more. He understood. The operation had become larger than either of them. One emotional decision could destroy months of federal preparation. Saturday morning arrived before sunrise. Chicago O'Hare International Airport buzzed with travelers pulling suitcases across polished floors. Ryan Carter met them near the airline lounge. There they are. He hugged Ethan first, then Kaylee. You have no idea how hard it was keeping this secret. Kaylee laughed through watery eyes. I believe it. Ryan grinned. He practically interrogated me every week to make sure every reservation was perfect. Ethan shook his head. Don't exaggerate. I'm not. Ryan lowered his voice toward Kaylee. He even changed hotels 3 times because he wanted the best sunset view. Kaylee looked at Ethan. You really did all that? He shrugged. You've always wanted Hawaii. She squeezed his hand without saying anything. Boarding began 30 minutes later. The flight passed peacefully. Clouds stretched endlessly beneath the aircraft. Kaylee spent much of the trip looking out the window. Occasionally, she reached for Ethan's hand. Neither mentioned the strange weeks leading to this moment. When the plane descended toward Maui, turquoise water shimmered beneath brilliant afternoon sunlight. Volcanic mountains rose beyond the coastline. Palm trees lined white beaches. From above, the island looked untouched by conflict, almost unreal. Their driver greeted them outside baggage claim. Aloha, Mr. and Mrs. West. The luxury SUV carried them south toward Wailea. Ocean waves flashed beside the highway. Tourists walked barefoot between cafes. Live Hawaiian music drifted through open-air restaurants. Kaylee rolled down the window. Warm ocean air filled the vehicle. For the first time in days, she smiled without forcing it. I've dreamed about this since I was a little girl. Ethan watched her quietly. That smile reminded him of the woman he had married. The woman hidden beneath weeks of fear. The Four Seasons resort exceeded every expectation. Fresh flower lays, open-air lobby, gentle waterfalls, a panoramic view of the Pacific stretching toward the horizon. Their suite overlooked the ocean exactly as Ryan had promised. As a staff member explained resort amenities, Ethan noticed something unusual. A man wearing casual vacation clothes stood near the far edge of the lobby. Baseball cap, dark sunglasses, nothing remarkable. Except he wasn't admiring the view. He was watching arrivals. Specifically, he was watching Ethan. The man touched an earpiece almost imperceptibly before walking away. Professional. Disciplined. Not a tourist. Ethan pretended not to notice. Inside their suite, Kaylee stepped onto the balcony and stared silently at the waves crashing against black volcanic rocks below. It's beautiful, she whispered. It is. She turned toward him. Thank you. Before Ethan could answer, his eyes drifted toward the neighboring balcony. The same man in the baseball cap was walking across the courtyard below, speaking quietly into his phone. A second man appeared from another pathway. They exchanged only a brief glance, no greeting, no conversation, then separated. Classic surveillance behavior. His instincts sharpened immediately. Someone had reached Hawaii before they had. That evening they walked hand in hand along the beach as the sun melted into the Pacific. To everyone around them, they looked like another happily married couple celebrating an anniversary. Only Ethan noticed the reflection of a camera lens from an upper-floor balcony. Only Ethan counted the same unfamiliar face appearing for the 3rd time since check-in. Paradise had all the colors of a dream, but beneath its beauty, someone had already begun watching every move they made. Ethan West had stopped believing in coincidence long before he became a federal investigator. One unfamiliar face could be chance, Two might still be luck. 3 appearances in less than 6 hours meant someone had established a pattern. The man in the baseball cap had appeared in the hotel lobby outside the restaurant, and again near the beach path just after sunset. Each time he stayed long enough to observe, never long enough to invite attention. Professional, disciplined, patient. Exactly the qualities Ethan respected in an investigator. Exactly the qualities he feared in an adversary. He never pointed the man out to Kaylee. If she truly was being threatened, letting her enjoy even a few hours without additional fear mattered more than satisfying his curiosity. That night after dinner, they returned to their suite. The balcony doors remained open. Warm Hawaiian air carried the sound of waves breaking against the rocks below. Kaylee stood outside, her hands resting on the railing. "I don't think I've ever seen water this blue." Ethan joined her. "It almost doesn't look real." She smiled. "When this is over." She stopped herself. He looked toward her. "When what is over?" Kaylee hesitated only a second. "This year." She forced a laugh. "It's been busy." He nodded but said nothing. She had corrected herself too quickly. Another unfinished sentence, another secret pressing against the surface. Around 10 o'clock, they decided to walk along the beach before bed. The resort pathways glowed beneath soft lanterns. Couples laughed over tropical drinks. Children chased one another through the grass. Live music drifted from an outdoor bar. For anyone else, the evening would have been perfect. Ethan noticed details no tourist would. The security guard near the south entrance changed positions twice in 15 minutes. A maintenance worker spent unusually long talking into a radio with no visible equipment nearby. 2 men wearing different clothing entered the same service hallway only seconds apart. None of those observations proved anything. Together they formed another pattern. As they walked back toward the suite, Kaylee slipped her hand into his. "I've missed this." "So have I. I know things have felt different." He waited. She looked down at the stone pathway. "I'm sorry." "For what?" I've been distracted." He studied her face in the soft light. The apology sounded genuine. "I figured work was stressful." "It is." Again, the truth hid inside an incomplete answer. Back inside the suite, Ethan engaged the electronic deadbolt and checked the balcony door. Locked. He placed both room key cards on the desk beside his wallet. A habit. Everything always had a place. Around midnight, he woke instinctively. No sound had disturbed him. Years of investigative work had simply trained his body to recognize when something felt different. The bedroom remained dark, except for pale moonlight spilling through the curtains. Kaylee slept peacefully beside him. He listened. Air conditioning, ocean waves, nothing else. Still, something felt wrong. Quietly, he climbed out of bed and walked into the living room. The front door remained locked. Balcony secure. Nothing appeared disturbed. He almost returned to bed when he noticed one tiny detail. The desk drawer beneath the television wasn't completely closed. He distinctly remembered pushing it shut before sleeping. He stepped closer. Inside lay the resort directory, notepad, pen. Everything looked ordinary, until he opened the room safe hidden inside the closet. The safe door stood unlocked. Ethan frowned. He had locked it himself. Inside remained his passport. Kaylee's passport. Cash. His watch. Nothing appeared missing. He examined each item carefully. Even the envelopes containing emergency travel documents remained exactly where he had left them. Whoever had opened the safe hadn't taken anything, which meant they had probably copied something. He immediately checked the slim folder containing printed travel confirmations. Still there. He inspected his passport. Nothing visible. No scratches. No marks. No indication anyone had handled it. He photographed the safe before touching another object, then quietly reset the lock. Returning to bed, he closed his eyes without sleeping. Someone had entered the room. He was certain of it. Morning confirmed his suspicion. At breakfast, a hotel manager approached their table. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. West." "Morning. I hope everything has been satisfactory." "It has." The manager smiled politely. "We're performing a routine electronic lock inspection today." Ethan looked up. "When?" "Sometime between 9 and noon." "I'd rather postpone." "Of course." "No one enters our room without us present." The manager looked slightly surprised. "Certainly, sir." After he walked away, Kaylee tilted her head. "Since when are you so protective of hotel rooms?" "I've seen too many documentaries," she laughed. "Only you would answer that." He smiled back. The explanation sounded harmless enough. An hour later, while Kaylee enjoyed the resort spa, Ethan remained in the suite. His secure phone vibrated. Sarah Mitchell. "We've confirmed surveillance." "So have I." "Our people identified at least 3 individuals connected to Graham Sullivan's private security contractor." "They're inside the resort." "Yes." "They entered our room." "We believe they did." Ethan stared through the balcony glass. "What were they looking for?" "We're still working on that." He thought about the unlocked safe. "They didn't steal anything." "They may not have needed to." Sarah paused. "Our cyber team has another concern." "I'm listening." "We believe someone copied digital authentication data." Ethan frowned. "From what? Possibly passport chips." His expression hardened. Modern passports contained embedded electronic information, enough to verify identity, enough to facilitate international financial transactions when paired with stolen credentials. Someone wasn't searching for jewelry. Someone wanted identities. The line went silent for several seconds. Then Sarah asked quietly, "How's Kaylee?" The question surprised him. "She's frightened." "You finally noticed." He almost smiled. "I think she's been frightened for weeks," Sarah answered carefully. "Trust what you observe, not what you fear." After ending the call, Ethan walked onto the balcony. Far below, guests relaxed beside the infinity pool. The man in the baseball cap stood near the towel station, pretending to read messages on his phone. A second man approached briefly. Neither acknowledged the other. Yet as they separated, both glanced toward Ethan's balcony within seconds. Confirmation. They knew exactly where he was. Later that afternoon, Kaylee returned from the spa, looking unusually pale. "Everything okay?" She nodded too quickly. "My phone." "What about it?" She unlocked the screen. An anonymous text message filled the display. No number, no sender. Only 6 words. "Keep following the plan, or he dies." Her hands trembled. She immediately locked the phone before Ethan could ask another question. "I need some air." She walked onto the balcony alone. Ethan remained inside. He had seen enough. The torn paper fragment from Chicago. The fear in her eyes. Now the message. Every piece pointed in the same direction. Someone wasn't forcing Kaylee to betray him. Someone was forcing her to protect him through silence. As the sun began sinking toward the Pacific, Ethan looked across the resort grounds once more. Near the beachfront restaurant, the baseball cap was gone. In his place stood another man. Different face, same posture, same patient observation, different operatives, identical behavior. Whoever Graham Sullivan had hired wasn't improvising anymore. The operation had entered its next phase, and Ethan realized with chilling certainty that the real target had never been the vacation itself. The vacation was only the perfect cover for something far larger that was about to begin. Ethan West did not confront Kaylee immediately. The anonymous message had answered one question and created 10 more. If someone had threatened her with his life, every secret she had carried suddenly looked different. Anger no longer belonged anywhere in the conversation. Fear did. He gave her time. The Hawaiian sunset painted the sky with streaks of orange and crimson, while waves rolled steadily onto the beach below their balcony. Guests applauded as the last edge of the sun disappeared beneath the Pacific. Kaylee never looked up. She stood with both hands gripping the balcony railing until her knuckles turned pale. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan stepped beside her. "I know." She closed her eyes. "No, you don't." He waited. Silence often invited truth more effectively than questions. She took a slow breath. "When you overheard me on the phone." His heart skipped once. She knew. "I realized afterward you had come home early." He looked at her carefully. "You knew I heard something." "I wasn't sure how much." She wiped away a tear before it could fall. "I kept hoping you hadn't heard enough to misunderstand." "I heard one sentence." She nodded slowly. "After Hawaii. He'll never see it coming." Another nod. "I've replayed those words every day." "So have I." She looked toward the ocean. I wasn't talking about you." He remained perfectly still. "I was talking about Graham Sullivan." The name hung between them. "The phone call wasn't about leaving our marriage," she continued. "It was about exposing him." Ethan didn't interrupt. Everything Sarah had uncovered, everything he had documented, everything suddenly began aligning. Kaylee drew another unsteady breath. 3 months ago, I accepted a design contract for Sullivan Infrastructure's new executive conference center. "I know." She looked surprised. "You know?" "I found the company." She gave a faint, exhausted smile. "I should have expected that." She turned back toward the horizon. "At first, it was just another project. Custom interiors, furniture selection, lighting design. What changed? I saw documents I wasn't supposed to see." Her fingers tightened around the railing. "I stayed late one evening because a contractor delivered the wrong materials." She swallowed hard. "Graham Sullivan and Olivia Bennett were arguing inside the conference room." "What about?" "I wasn't trying to listen." "But you heard." "I heard numbers," she nodded. "Hundreds of millions." She paused. "And I heard Olivia say someone inside the federal government would eventually notice." Ethan said nothing. "So I left." But I accidentally took the wrong presentation folder." She looked ashamed. "It was identical to mine." "When did you realize the next morning?" "What was inside?" "Financial reports." "Real ones?" "I think so." "They weren't polished presentations. They were spreadsheets." She looked directly at Ethan. "They listed payments that didn't make sense." His pulse remained calm. "Did they know you had them?" "Not at first." "When did they find out?" "The following week." She closed her eyes again. "Someone broke into my office. They searched everything. But they didn't find the folder, because I had already hidden it." Ethan felt the final pieces beginning to connect. "The envelope you gave Olivia." Kaylee nodded. "It wasn't evidence." "What was it?" "Fake copies." "You made duplicates." "I scanned everything." She reached into her purse. "I've been carrying this ever since." She removed a small silver flash drive no larger than a thumb. Ethan stared at it. "The originals." "Encrypted copies." "You still have them." "I never gave them back." His eyes remained fixed on the drive. Months of financial records. Potentially the evidence everyone had been searching for. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked. "Because they knew exactly who you were." He looked up. "They knew you investigated financial crimes." She nodded. "They knew where we lived. They knew your work schedule. They knew everything." Tears finally escaped down her cheeks. "The first message said if I told you anything." She couldn't finish. Ethan already knew the ending. "They'd kill me," She shook her head. Worse. She unlocked her phone and handed it to him. Instead of the most recent anonymous text, she opened an older photograph. It had been taken outside their home. Ethan's Honda sat in the driveway. A red circle surrounded him as he carried groceries inside. The timestamp dated back nearly a month. Beneath the image appeared one sentence: "We never miss." Another photograph followed. Ethan leaving his office. Another. Ryan Carter standing outside his travel agency. Another. Their backyard. Someone had been watching every part of their lives. "I thought if I stayed quiet," Kaylee whispered, "they'd eventually take the files back and leave us alone. But they didn't. No. They kept asking for more." She nodded. "They wanted passwords." "What passwords?" "Anything connected to you. Federal credentials, bank information, travel reservations. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. The forged documents. I never signed anything." "I know. The meeting with Olivia. I was buying time. The phone calls. They told me exactly what to say." Ethan let out a slow breath. Every suspicion he had carefully refused to confirm had now collapsed. Not because of emotion, because of evidence. The anonymous threats, the forged signature, the deleted messages, the copied travel itinerary. Every fact pointed in one direction. Kaylee had never been working with Graham Sullivan. She had been surviving him. "I should have trusted you," she said quietly. He looked at her for a long moment. "You were trying to protect me. I almost destroyed us." "No." He gently took the flash drive from her hand. "They tried." She finally broke down completely. Years of quiet strength disappeared as she leaned into him, sobbing against his shoulder. He held her without speaking. There were no speeches capable of repairing weeks of fear. Only presence, only patience. After several minutes, she stepped back. "What happens now?" Ethan looked toward the ocean, where darkness had begun swallowing the last traces of sunset. "Now we stop running." His secure phone vibrated. Sarah Mitchell. He answered immediately. "Sarah." Her voice sounded urgent. "Ethan, we have the evidence." "What?" "Kaylee kept encrypted financial records." Silence. Then Sarah spoke carefully. "Good. What's wrong?" "Our surveillance team just confirmed something." "What?" "Graham Sullivan landed in Maui less than an hour ago." Ethan's expression hardened. "He's here." "Yes." "He checked into a private villa less than 3 miles from your resort." Ethan looked across the beachfront as resort lights flickered to life. Guests laughed. Music drifted through the warm evening air. Everything appeared peaceful. Everything was a lie. Sarah continued. "We believe the offshore transfer begins tomorrow night." Ethan tightened his grip on the phone. "And Graham Sullivan wants to watch it happen himself." Ethan ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. For several seconds, neither he nor Kaylee spoke. The warm Hawaiian breeze carried the scent of salt and plumeria across the balcony, but the peaceful setting no longer belonged to them. Somewhere beyond the palm trees and carefully landscaped pathways, Graham Sullivan had arrived. Not to enjoy paradise, to finish something. Kaylee looked at the flash drive still resting in Ethan's hand. "I never wanted any of this." "I know. I should have trusted you from the beginning." Ethan gently closed her fingers around the drive again. "No." She looked confused. "You keep it." "What?" "If they somehow separate us, they'll expect me to have it. You don't want the evidence. I want them to believe I don't." She understood immediately. For the first time in weeks, they were thinking together instead of separately, the same way they always had. Ethan lowered his voice. From this point forward, nothing changes. You mean, we act exactly the way they expect. You think they're watching us now. He glanced casually toward the beach instead of looking around. I know they are. Kaylee instinctively started turning her head. He gently touched her wrist. Don't. She froze. Smile? What? Just smile. She forced a small smile. Good. He wrapped one arm around her shoulders. Anyone watching should see a married couple enjoying their anniversary, not two witnesses preparing to dismantle a criminal enterprise. An hour later, Ethan left the suite alone. Officially, he was walking to the resort convenience shop for bottled water. Unofficially, he had arranged a meeting. The path wound through tropical gardens before reaching a quiet terrace overlooking the ocean. Sarah Mitchell sat alone on a wooden bench wearing shorts, sandals, and a floral shirt. Nothing about her appearance suggested a federal agent. She didn't acknowledge Ethan until he sat beside her. You weren't followed. I know. You checked. I always check. She handed him a folded tourist brochure. Inside was a miniature satellite map of the resort. 3 small circles marked different locations. Our surveillance teams. He studied the map. Only 3. Visible. He looked up. Sarah smiled faintly. You taught me never to reveal all the assets. Fair enough? He returned the brochure. Kaylee has the financial records. Sarah's expression sharpened. Original files. Encrypted copies. Can we verify them? We'll have them tonight. Sarah became serious again. Then everything changes. Meaning, until now we suspected Graham Sullivan. She looked directly at Ethan. Once those files are authenticated, we can prove intent. And the transfer. Still scheduled for tomorrow night. Ethan considered the timeline. If we arrest him too early, the money disappears. If we wait too long, he disappears. Sarah nodded. Exactly. Timing would determine everything. She reached into her beach bag and removed another envelope. Jonathan Pierce sent this. Inside were emergency legal authorizations already signed by a federal judge. Search warrants, asset seizure orders, electronic interception approvals. Every document remained sealed. They become active only after the transfer begins, Sarah explained. No earlier. No earlier. The legal groundwork had already been completed. Now they needed evidence beyond any reasonable doubt. Back in the suite, Kaylee connected the flash drive to Ethan's encrypted laptop. A password prompt appeared. She hesitated. I've never told anyone this. You don't have to. I want to. Her fingers typed a 16-character passphrase. The drive unlocked. Hundreds of files filled the screen. Spreadsheets, internal emails, payment authorizations, contract amendments, executive meeting notes. Ethan opened the first ledger. Within seconds, he recognized the accounting structure. It was genuine. No amateur could have fabricated something this detailed. Every transaction carried approval codes, internal references, bank routing numbers, dates stretching back nearly 4 years. He opened another file, then another. One document immediately caught his attention. Project Sunrise. He frowned. What is it? Kaylee asked. I've seen this code before. Where? In one of the shell companies. He opened the folder. Inside lay dozens of scheduled transfers, each one routed through different corporations before reaching offshore accounts. The final page listed tomorrow's transaction. Amount $214,870. Destination, an investment holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. Execution window, aren't? 08:00 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, exactly 24 hours away. Sarah had been right. This wasn't merely another payment, it was the final extraction. As Ethan continued reviewing documents, another file drew his attention. Personnel monitoring. He clicked. His heartbeat slowed. Inside were photographs. Not financial records. Surveillance reports. His own name appeared first. Ethan West. Daily routine. Vehicle information. Work schedule. Known associates. Ryan Carter. Sarah Mitchell. Jonathan Pierce. Even Mrs. Delgado from Harper's Corner Cafe. Someone had documented every meaningful person connected to Ethan's life. Kaylee covered her mouth. I never saw this. He kept scrolling. Another profile appeared. Kaylee West. Work schedule, medical appointments, favorite grocery store, running route. The level of detail bordered on obsessive. This hadn't been assembled over weeks. It had taken months, perhaps years. Someone had studied them long before Kaylee accidentally discovered the financial records. A secure message flashed across Ethan's screen. Sarah, authentication complete. Files are genuine. Follow original plan. He deleted the message immediately. No unnecessary digital traces. At sunrise the following morning, Ethan and Kaylee behaved exactly like tourists. They ate breakfast beside the pool, took photographs near the beach, visited local shops. Kaylee even bought a handmade seashell bracelet from a street vendor. Anyone observing them would have concluded the couple had finally relaxed. Only Ethan noticed the same dark SUV parked across the street 3 different times that day. Only Ethan recognized the hotel employee who wasn't actually employed by the resort. The operation around them was tightening. Late that afternoon, Sarah sent one final update through an encrypted channel. Transfer authorization expected within 3 hours. Federal teams in position. Await confirmation. Ethan memorized the message before erasing it. He stood on the balcony watching waves roll endlessly toward shore. Tomorrow, this same view might belong to ordinary vacationers again. Or it might become the backdrop for one of the largest financial crime arrests in recent federal history. Kaylee stepped beside him. Are you afraid? He considered the question honestly. Yes. She looked surprised. I've never heard you admit that. I'm not afraid for myself. He turned toward her. I'm afraid they may realize we know the truth before the transfer begins. She reached for his hand. They won't. You sound confident. They've underestimated you since the beginning. He smiled quietly. They underestimated both of us. As evening settled over Maui, lights illuminated Graham Sullivan's private oceanfront villa less than 3 miles away. Inside that villa, preparations for a $200 million transfer were already underway. Across the island, federal agents waited for one irreversible mistake. And inside the West's hotel suite, Ethan closed his laptop after reviewing the evidence one final time. Tomorrow, words would no longer matter. Only proof, only timing, only the truth. The day began with perfect weather. The Pacific stretched endlessly beneath a cloudless sky, and the early sunlight painted the surface of the water with shimmering bands of gold. Resort guests filled the breakfast terrace, discussing snorkeling excursions, hiking trails, and sunset cruises. For everyone else, it was another beautiful morning in Maui. For Ethan West, every minute mattered. He checked his watch. 8:15 a.m. Exactly 11 hours and 45 minutes remained before the scheduled transfer. Kaylee sat across from him, stirring her coffee without drinking it. She appeared calm. Only Ethan noticed the slight tremor in her left hand. He reached across the table and quietly squeezed it. No second thoughts. She nodded. No. They've already committed. I know. They won't stop. I know. Her voice sounded steadier than it had in weeks, not because she was less afraid, because uncertainty had finally been replaced by purpose. At 9:30 a.m., Ethan received a secure message. No changes. Surveillance continues. He memorized it before deleting it. Sarah had insisted that no electronic communication remain on any personal device longer than necessary. Evidence belonged in secured federal systems, not in a hotel room. The rest of the morning unfolded exactly as planned. Ethan and Kaylee rented paddle boards. They walked through the resort gardens. They stopped at a beachfront cafe for lunch. Every movement matched the itinerary someone had likely copied weeks earlier. Whoever monitored them would see nothing unusual. That illusion mattered, because 3 miles away, inside a secluded oceanfront villa, Graham Sullivan believed he controlled the timetable. He believed Ethan West was simply another tourist celebrating an anniversary. He believed federal investigators were nearly 4,000 miles away in Chicago. He was wrong on every count. At 5:40 p.m., Ethan excused himself to take what appeared to be a business phone call. Instead, he entered a quiet conference room that Sarah had secretly reserved under another name. Inside waited Sarah Mitchell Jonathan Pierce and Detective Marcus Reed. No introductions were necessary. The atmosphere carried the quiet intensity of people who had spent months preparing for one opportunity. Sarah projected a digital timeline onto a portable monitor. Authentication begins at 7:42. She pointed to the first marker. The offshore banking gateway opens 18 minutes later. Another marker appeared. Final authorization expected between 8 and 8:15. Marcus crossed his arms. Our tactical teams are already in position. Jonathan adjusted his glasses. No arrests until funds begin moving. Ethan nodded. If we move early, defense attorneys argue attempted fraud. Sarah finished the thought. If we wait until execution begins, conspiracy becomes completed action. Jonathan opened a sealed folder. The warrants activate the moment we receive confirmation. Everything depended on timing, every second. Sarah looked toward Ethan. How's Kaylee holding up? Better than I expected. Can she continue? She wants this finished. Sarah nodded. Then we finish it tonight. Back at the suite, Kaylee stood on the balcony watching waves crash against the rocks. She turned as Ethan entered. It's time? He nodded. Soon. She opened her purse and removed her phone. I received another message. He remained calm. What did it say? She unlocked the screen. Stay in your room. Wait for instructions. Delete this message. She handed him the phone. Don't delete it. I thought, not anymore. He photographed the screen using his secure device. Metadata, timestamp, cellular routing information. Everything mattered now. He returned the phone. For the first time, we keep the evidence. She smiled faintly. You've been saying that since this started. Because it's true. At exactly 7:41 p.m., Sarah's voice came through Ethan's encrypted earpiece. Stand by. The room fell silent. Even the sound of the ocean seemed distant. Sarah continued. Cyber Division confirms login attempts. A pause. They're entering the financial network. Ethan watched the digital clock. 7:44. Another update. Authentication successful. The transfer had begun. Not completed, begun. That distinction activated every federal warrant already signed by the judge. Miles away inside a secure operations center, analysts watched encrypted banking traffic flow through servers across 3 continents: Singapore, Luxembourg, the Cayman Islands. Layer after layer of shell corporations activated exactly as Kaylee's stolen files had predicted. Nothing unexpected. That was the strongest evidence of all. Sarah's voice remained calm. Funds moving. Marcus Reed immediately transmitted the next order. Execute Phase 1. Across Maui, unmarked vehicles quietly left concealed staging areas. Federal agents moved toward Graham Sullivan's villa from 3 separate directions. Others approached temporary offices rented by Sullivan Infrastructure. Still others coordinated simultaneously, with mainland agents executing search warrants in Chicago. No sirens, no dramatic chase, only synchronized precision. Inside the villa, Graham Sullivan sat before 6 computer monitors displaying financial dashboards. Olivia Bennett stood beside him reviewing confirmation codes. Neither noticed the operation unfolding around them. Their attention remained fixed on the transfer, exactly where Sarah wanted it. At 8:03 p.m., another voice entered Ethan's earpiece. 214 million confirmed in transit. Sarah responded instantly. Lock the accounts. Within seconds, emergency judicial seizure orders reached participating financial institutions. Accounts froze, transfers halted, international compliance agreements activated automatically. The money stopped moving. Inside the villa, warning messages erupted across every monitor. Transaction failed. Account restricted. Federal hold. Olivia stared in disbelief. What happened? Graham lunged toward another keyboard. Run the backup route. She tried. Access denied. He entered another authorization code. Invalid credentials. His calm expression disappeared for the first time. Outside tactical teams quietly surrounded the property. Marcus received confirmation. Perimeter secure. Sarah spoke one final sentence. Execute. The front door opened. Federal agents, don't move. The operation lasted less than 90 seconds. No shots, no struggle, no confusion. Computers remained powered on exactly as investigators needed them. Hard drives were captured before anyone could erase them. Encrypted phones were seized while still unlocked. Every second of preparation paid off. At the resort, Ethan received Sarah's final update. We have him. He closed his eyes, not in relief, in gratitude. Months of planning, weeks of patience, days of pretending, everything had led to this moment. Kaylee looked at him. It's over. He slowly opened his eyes. The transfer is. She searched his face. And Graham? He won't be watching another sunset from that villa. Tears filled her eyes again. Not from fear this time, from release. The weight she had carried alone for months finally lifted. She embraced Ethan tightly. He held her without speaking. Outside the Pacific continued its endless rhythm, completely indifferent to the collapse of a criminal empire. But Ethan knew better. Tonight had never been about revenge. It had never been about proving he was smarter than Graham Sullivan. It had been about something far simpler. Evidence had defeated deception, patience had defeated panic. And for the first time since he overheard a single sentence about Hawaii, the truth no longer needed to hide. Yet Sarah's phone call 10 minutes later reminded him that the story was not completely finished. We've secured the money, she said. We've arrested Olivia Bennett. She paused. But Graham Sullivan is asking for one thing. Ethan frowned. What? He says he'll only speak to you. Ethan stared at the phone for several seconds after Sarah finished speaking. He asked for me. Specifically. Did he request an attorney first? He already has one. Then why me? We don't know. Sarah's voice remained measured. But before you decide, understand something. I'm listening. He hasn't confessed. He wants leverage. Probably. She paused. Or he believes he still controls part of the story. Ethan looked through the balcony doors toward the dark Pacific. Only hours earlier, Graham Sullivan had watched more than $200 million begin moving through an international laundering network. Now he sat inside a federal holding facility on Maui. The money had stopped. The evidence had been preserved. Yet the man himself believed he still possessed something valuable. I'll meet him, Ethan said, tomorrow morning. We'll arrange it. The temporary federal interview room occupied a secure government office near Kahului Airport. There were no steel bars, no dramatic interrogation lights, only gray walls, a recording camera, and a rectangular table bolted to the floor. Ethan arrived precisely at 9. Sarah Mitchell and Jonathan Pierce waited outside. Sarah handed him a thin folder. We imaged every computer seized from the villa overnight. Anything unexpected? She nodded. Thousands of files. Anything missing? Not yet. Jonathan adjusted his glasses. Remember, I'm aware. You are not here as an interrogator. I know. You're a witness. Ethan nodded once. I'll keep it that way. The interview room door opened. 2 federal marshals escorted Graham Sullivan inside. He looked remarkably composed. His tailored Navy suit had been replaced with a plain detention uniform, yet his posture remained straight. He smiled as though they were meeting for lunch instead of across a government table. Ethan West. Graham Sullivan. I've wanted to meet you. I wish I could say the same. One marshal activated the recording system. The other stepped outside. The door closed. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Graham leaned back. You surprised me. I imagine yesterday surprised a lot of people. It did. He smiled faintly. You know what your greatest strength is. Ethan remained silent. You never rushed. Graham folded his hands. Most husbands would have confronted their wives after hearing that phone call. You counted on that? I hoped for it. Another small piece clicked into place. Graham continued. If you had accused Kaylee, he shrugged, our timeline would have accelerated. So the marriage was part of your strategy. It was part of the distraction. Ethan watched him carefully. Not his words, his breathing, his eyes, the small movements that often revealed more than a statement itself. You wanted me looking inward, Ethan said. You wanted me questioning my wife instead of following the money. Graham smiled. You figured that out eventually. No. Ethan's voice stayed calm. I refused to stop following the evidence. For the first time, Graham's smile weakened. You know what disappointed me? He didn't wait for an answer. Kaylee. Ethan said nothing. She was supposed to return the files. When she didn't, we adapted. You threatened her. We persuaded her. You threatened to kill me. Graham's expression hardened. I never said that. You didn't have to. Silence settled over the room. The camera continued recording. Every word, every pause, every expression. Graham leaned forward. You still don't understand? Then explain. This operation wasn't about $200 million. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. No. No. The money was replaceable. What wasn't? Our access. He tapped the table lightly. We spent years placing people where they needed to be. Inside companies. Inside banks. Inside procurement offices. His voice remained almost conversational. The transfer was only the final stage. Ethan immediately understood. The network itself mattered more than the money. If investigators dismantled the organization, future fraud became impossible. The financial loss was secondary. That's why you monitored me for months, Ethan said. You wanted to know what I knew. We wanted to know how you thought. Graham almost sounded impressed. You have routines. Everyone does. You always verified facts before acting. Correct. So we manufactured facts. Forged signatures. Anonymous warnings. Copied travel reservations. Every false clue had been carefully designed to fit Ethan's investigative habits. Not random. Engineered. You underestimated one variable, Ethan said. Graham looked curious. Which one? My wife. The room became quiet again. You believed fear would eventually make her surrender. Graham didn't respond. Instead, Ethan continued calmly. She protected the evidence longer than any of you expected. For the first time during the interview, Graham looked away, only briefly, less than a second. But Ethan noticed. There it was. The first genuine crack. A marshal knocked softly before opening the door. Sarah stepped inside carrying a folder. She didn't interrupt immediately. Instead, she placed several printed photographs on the table. Satellite images, server rooms, shipping containers, offshore banking records. Each one corresponded perfectly with the files recovered from Graham's computers. She looked toward Ethan. Our forensic team finished. So quickly. We got lucky. She turned toward Graham. Or maybe you became careless. Graham looked at the photographs without speaking. Sarah continued. We recovered deleted server backups. Another photograph. We recovered encrypted communications. Another. We recovered transaction authorizations. She placed one final page directly in front of him. And we recovered your voice. A transcript. Recorded conference calls, authorization orders, specific instructions directing the laundering operation. Jonathan Pierce entered moments later. He carried another document. The federal prosecutor asked me to deliver this personally. He placed it beside the transcript. Grand jury indictment. 37 counts. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, identity theft, witness intimidation. Every major charge supported by evidence. No speculation. No assumptions. Only proof. Graham slowly turned the first page. Then the second. Then he stopped reading. The confidence that had followed him into the room finally disappeared. He understood. The case no longer depended on a confession. It didn't depend on Kaylee or Ethan or anyone else's memory. It depended on records, digital evidence, financial trails, his own communications. Everything he believed had been erased. Ethan stood. Our conversation is finished. Graham looked up. You really think this ends with me? Ethan met his eyes. No. It ends with the truth. Outside the interview room, Sarah walked beside Ethan toward the parking area. You were right. About what? He wanted control. Sarah smiled slightly. He lost it. They stepped into the warm Hawaiian morning. News helicopters circled in the distance above downtown Kahului. Reporters had already learned about the arrests. By afternoon, every major financial network in the country would be discussing the collapse of Sullivan Infrastructure Group. But Ethan wasn't thinking about headlines. He was thinking about Kaylee. Weeks earlier, he had nearly allowed one overheard sentence to become the foundation of his judgment. Instead, he had waited, observed, verified. That decision had saved far more than a federal investigation. It had saved his marriage. Sarah's phone rang. She answered briefly before looking at Ethan. That was Chicago. Something else, she nodded. Our teams finished searching Sullivan's headquarters. What did they find? A secure basement archive. She smiled. Thousands of original financial records. Enough evidence, Ethan realized, to ensure Graham Sullivan would never again walk free. 8 months later, the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois became the final stage of a story that had begun with a single overheard sentence. Winter had settled over Chicago. Outside the courthouse, reporters stood behind temporary barricades despite the freezing wind. Television crews adjusted cameras while newspaper photographers waited for the defendants to arrive. The investigation had grown far beyond Maui. Federal prosecutors had expanded the case into one of the largest public procurement fraud prosecutions in recent state history. 21 defendants, 34 shell corporations, more than $200 million in attempted money laundering, thousands of pages of financial evidence, and one jury. Ethan West arrived through a secured entrance before sunrise. He wore the same dark charcoal suit he reserved for court appearances, the same silver watch Kaylee had given him on their 5th anniversary, and the same calm expression that had carried him through every stage of the investigation. Kaylee walked beside him. She had been subpoenaed as a witness months earlier, but today she no longer looked like someone carrying fear. She looked like someone carrying the truth. "You ready?" Ethan asked quietly. She nodded. "I think so." "You don't have to be perfect." She looked at him. "I just have to tell the truth." He smiled. "Exactly." Inside courtroom 7, the atmosphere felt almost unusually quiet. There were no dramatic outbursts, no emotional confrontations, only orderly preparation. Court clerks arranged exhibits, attorneys reviewed notes, jurors quietly entered the jury box one by one. Judge Eleanor Whitmore took the bench precisely at 9 o'clock. "Good morning." The courtroom rose. After everyone sat again, the prosecution began presenting its final sequence of evidence. Unlike the sensational headlines outside the case, inside the courtroom relied on something much simpler. Documents, numbers, timelines. Every financial transfer recovered from Graham Sullivan's computers matched the records Kaylee had preserved on the encrypted flash drive. Every shell company connected through authenticated banking records. Every electronic authorization corresponded with Graham's own login credentials. One forensic accountant spent nearly 2 hours explaining how the money traveled through multiple corporations before reaching offshore accounts. Color-coded charts appeared on large courtroom monitors. Blue lines represented legitimate construction payments. Red lines represented fraudulent transfers. The jury watched carefully as each transaction built upon the previous one. No dramatic language was necessary. The numbers told their own story. Next came digital forensic specialists. One expert explained how investigators recovered deleted server backups from Sullivan infrastructure. Another demonstrated how metadata connected internal emails directly to Olivia Bennett. A cybersecurity analyst showed the jury the failed attempts to access Ethan West's federal credentials. The timestamps matched perfectly with the copied travel itinerary and the unauthorized access to Ryan Carter's reservation system. Every isolated event that had once appeared unrelated now fit together with remarkable precision. The defense attempted to challenge individual pieces. Perhaps a server timestamp was inaccurate. Perhaps someone else used Graham's credentials. Perhaps the shell companies were merely aggressive tax structures. Each argument collapsed against the larger body of evidence. No single exhibit carried the case. The combination did. That was exactly how Ethan had built it. Late in the afternoon, Kaylee was called to testify. She walked calmly to the witness stand. The clerk administered the oath. She sat. The prosecutor approached gently. "Mrs. West, how did you first become involved with Sullivan Infrastructure Group?" She described accepting the interior design contract, the conference center, the mistaken folder, finding financial spreadsheets that clearly did not belong with design materials. The prosecutor never interrupted. The jury listened attentively. Then came the difficult part. "Why didn't you immediately report what you found?" Kaylee took a slow breath. She glanced once toward Ethan. He offered only a small nod. She turned back toward the jury. "Because they found me before I found the courage." Silence filled the courtroom. She described the anonymous photographs, the threats, the messages warning that Ethan's life depended upon her silence. No exaggeration, no emotional performance, only facts. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. West, isn't it true that you voluntarily met with Olivia Bennett on multiple occasions?" "Yes." "You handed her envelopes?" "Yes." "So you cooperated?" Kaylee answered without hesitation. "I delayed." The attorney frowned. "What do you mean?" "I made copies." She looked directly at the jury. "I never returned the evidence they wanted." The prosecutor introduced the silver flash drive into evidence. The courtroom monitors displayed its authentication history, digital signatures, hash verification, federal forensic validation. The chain of custody remained complete from the moment Ethan received the drive in Maui. The defense objected. Judge Whitmore overruled the objection. By the end of Kaylee's testimony, Several jurors were taking extensive notes. The following morning, Ethan testified. He spoke for less than 90 minutes. Unlike television courtroom dramas, prosecutors did not ask him for dramatic conclusions. Instead, they walked methodically through his documentation. His encrypted observation log, the forged signature analysis, the copied travel reservation records, the anonymous warning, the adhesive residue found inside his vehicle. Every observation had been dated, timed, photographed, preserved. The prosecutor asked one final question. "Investigator West, throughout your private observations, why did you never confront your wife?" Ethan answered after a brief pause. "Because suspicion isn't evidence." The courtroom became completely silent. He continued. "If I had acted on fear instead of facts, I would have destroyed the one person who was risking everything to protect both the evidence and my life." The prosecutor nodded. "No further questions." The defense chose not to cross-examine for long. There was little left to challenge. The record spoke more convincingly than any witness could. Closing arguments lasted 1 day. The prosecution emphasized preparation, documentation, and corroboration. The defense argued that Graham Sullivan had merely trusted the wrong employees. But the recovered emails, voice recordings, financial authorizations, and deleted backups all pointed in one direction: responsibility. 3 days later, the jury returned. Every person inside the courtroom stood as the foreperson handed the verdict form to the clerk. Judge Whitmore looked toward the jury. "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have." The clerk began reading. "Count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty." The word repeated again and again. Wire fraud, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Conspiracy, guilty. Identity theft, guilty. Witness intimidation, guilty. By the time the final count had been read, Graham Sullivan remained motionless. Olivia Bennett lowered her head. Several other defendants quietly closed their eyes. There were no emotional outbursts, no dramatic confessions. Only the quiet weight of accountability settling across the courtroom. Judge Whitmore thanked the jurors for their service before scheduling sentencing. As everyone began leaving, reporters rushed toward the courthouse entrance. Cameras flashed, questions echoed across the hallway. Ethan ignored them. So did Kaylee. They walked together through a quieter exit beneath the courthouse, away from the microphones and television lights. Outside, snow had begun falling over Chicago. Kaylee slipped her hand into his. "We finally made it." Ethan looked up at the gray winter sky. "We did." Justice had arrived exactly the way he believed it should. Not through revenge, not through anger, not through a lucky break, but through patience, preparation, and evidence that no lie could survive. 6 months after the verdict, Ethan West opened the top drawer of his office desk. The drawer looked almost unchanged. Insurance papers, an old owner's manual for his Honda, a fountain pen he rarely used, and beneath them all rested a small, navy blue envelope. He picked it up carefully. Inside was a hotel keycard from the Four Seasons Resort, Maui. The first trip had never truly belonged to them. It had belonged to an investigation. To surveillance teams, to hidden cameras, to fear. He turned the card over once before slipping it into his jacket pocket. Then he walked downstairs. Kaylee was reading on the living room couch. She looked up as he entered. "You're smiling." "Am I?" "You don't even realize you're doing it." He laughed softly. "I have something to ask you." She closed her book. "What is it?" "Do you trust me?" A playful smile crossed her face. "After everything we've been through." She stood and walked toward him. "More than anyone." "Good." He handed her 2 boarding passes. She stared at them for several seconds before looking back at him. "Maui." He nodded. "We're going back." Her eyes widened. You've been planning this for months. She laughed. Again. This time without federal agents, without hidden microphones, without anonymous threats, without wondering who was watching. Only then did she finally allow herself to believe it. They returned to Hawaii 2 weeks later. The island looked exactly as Ethan remembered. The mountains still rose above the clouds. The trade wind still carried the scent of the ocean. The beaches still glowed beneath the afternoon sun. Yet everything felt different. Not because Maui had changed, because they had. The same driver met them at the airport. The same coastal highway curved toward Wailea. The same resort welcomed them with fresh flower leis. Even several employees recognized them. The manager smiled warmly. "Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. West." "It feels good to be here," Ethan replied, "and much quieter this time." The manager laughed without understanding the full meaning. Only Ethan and Kaylee exchanged a knowing glance. Their suite overlooked the same stretch of Pacific Ocean. Ethan stepped onto the balcony first. Months earlier, he had stood in almost the same place counting unfamiliar faces below. Now he saw families building sandcastles, couples taking photographs, children chasing waves. No surveillance, no coded signals, no hidden observers, only ordinary life. Kaylee joined him. "You checked, didn't you?" He smiled. "I did. And I found nothing." She slipped her arm through his. "Good." They spent the following days doing everything they had originally planned. They hiked the slopes of Haleakala before sunrise. They explored the road to Hana without worrying about being followed. They snorkeled in the clear waters of Molokini Crater. They laughed more during those 4 days than they had during the previous year. The silence between them had changed too. Before, silence had been filled with questions neither dared ask. Now silence felt comfortable, complete. One evening, they returned to the same private beach where Ethan had reserved a sunset dinner during their first trip. The restaurant staff had recreated the arrangement from the original reservation. A single table, white linen, soft lantern light, the Pacific stretching endlessly before them, the sky slowly transformed from gold to crimson. Kaylee looked around in amazement. "You remembered." "I remembered everything." Dinner arrived. Fresh seafood, local fruit, a bottle of sparkling cider, exactly as Ethan had imagined months before. They ate slowly. No phones, no interruptions, only conversation. Halfway through the meal, Ethan reached into his jacket. "There was one part of our anniversary gift you never received." He placed a small velvet box on the table. Kaylee smiled. "I thought the trip was the gift." It was. But not all of it. She opened the box carefully. Inside rested a delicate white gold pendant shaped like a compass. A tiny blue sapphire sparkled at its center. She looked at him with tears already forming. "It's beautiful." He lifted the necklace from the box. "Turn around." She brushed her hair aside. His hands moved gently as he fastened the clasp. When she turned back, the sapphire caught the fading sunlight. "What does the compass mean?" she asked softly. Ethan looked toward the ocean before answering. "I spent weeks believing we'd lost our direction." He met her eyes. "But no matter how far everything drifted, we found our way back." She reached across the table and held his hand. "I almost lost us." He shook his head. "No. We almost lost each other." "No." His voice remained calm. "We almost let someone else decide what we believed." She understood immediately. That distinction mattered. Trust had not survived because they were perfect. It survived because one of them had chosen patience over impulse. As darkness settled across the beach, they walked barefoot along the shoreline. The tide washed gently around their feet. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Kaylee broke the silence. "Do you ever think about that night?" "The phone call." She nodded. "Sometimes." "I do too," I wish I could erase it. Ethan smiled gently. I don't. She looked surprised. Why? Because if I erased that moment, I'd erase everything we learned afterward. She leaned her head against his shoulder as they continued walking. Back in Chicago, Sullivan Infrastructure had disappeared. Its assets had been liquidated under court supervision. The shell companies had been dissolved. Federal prosecutors continued pursuing the remaining members of the organization using the records recovered from the basement archive and the digital evidence seized in Hawaii. Ryan Carter had expanded his travel agency and still insisted on sending Ethan vacation ideas every month. Sarah Mitchell had received a promotion for coordinating one of the most successful financial crime investigations in the Bureau's regional history. Jonathan Pierce often joked that Ethan had become his favorite client because he listened before he acted. Life quietly moved forward. Not perfectly, but honestly. On their final morning in Maui, Ethan woke before sunrise and stepped onto the balcony one last time. The Pacific stretched endlessly toward the horizon. A new day slowly emerged from the darkness. Kaylee joined him carrying 2 cups of coffee. No investigation today? She asked with a smile. He accepted the cup. None. No suspects. None. No evidence to collect. He looked out at the calm ocean. Just one. She laughed. What evidence is that? He reached for her hand. That some promises are worth keeping twice. Together they watched the first sunlight spread across the water. There were no hidden cameras, no anonymous messages, no fear waiting behind the next conversation. Only 2 people who had nearly lost everything because of a lie and discovered that the strongest foundation a marriage could have was not certainty. It was the willingness to wait for the truth. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't the lie itself, it's the speed with which we choose to believe it. Ethan could have confronted Kaylee the night he overheard that phone call. He could have allowed fear, anger, and suspicion to destroy years of trust in a single conversation. Instead, he chose patience. He gathered facts before reaching conclusions, and that decision protected not only a federal investigation, but also the person he loved most. Life often places us in situations where emotions arrive long before the truth does. Whether in marriage, friendship, business, or family appearances can be carefully manipulated. Real strength is not found in reacting first. It is found in remaining calm long enough to let the evidence, the actions, and the truth reveal themselves. If this story reminded you of a time when patience changed the outcome of your own life, share your experience in the comments. Have you ever discovered that your first assumption was completely wrong? I'd love to read your story and hear where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, justice, and ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges, be sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story explores another unforgettable mystery.